Well, the Palestinians are blaming Tel Aviv for the current violence, saying that they were provoked by Israeli aggression. I spoke earlier to Palestinian ambassador to South Africa Hanan Jarrar about the escalating fighting between Palestine and Israel. Ambassador Hanan Jarrar, the Palestinian ambassador to South Africa, thank you very much indeed for joining us on the program.
Thank you for hosting me.
Ambassador, it's been quite a week for your people in Palestine. What do we know in terms of casualties to date?
Up to this moment, we have 48 Palestinians killed, including 13 children and 3 women. These are the casualties from the Palestinian side. Unfortunately, the situation is escalating drastically since 2 days, especially with the Israeli airstrikes on Gaza.
Why has it escalated to this point?
Because the Israelis, Netanyahu wants to prove to his electoral base, the fanatic settlers, that he is the man of the era and he can do whatever racist agenda they are demanding him to do. They are in the process of forming a new government, and he's not the one. After he failed to form a government, he's out now of the political scene, let's say, in regard to forming a government. So he wants to prove to everyone that he's the man of Israel and he's the one who can solve the Israeli population, and he is the one and the only who can really manage this crisis.
Israel is saying that they're defending themselves and that they only began the airstrikes after Hamas started firing rockets into Israel. Your view?
Of course not. Hamas. Why do Hamas starting rockets to Israel? Because there was escalation and there was provocation and there was incitement by the Israeli side for more than 10 days. They wanted to forcibly displace Palestinians' families from their indigenous home, from their indigenous land in Sheikh Jarrah. They were raiding Al-Aqsa Mosque, the third holiest place for Muslims, in the holy month of Ramadan, in the holiest night of Ramadan, Al-Qadr night. Palestinians were terrified, were incited at every single aspect in their lives for 10 days. What do you expect from us to do? Do you expect, if someone slap your face, would you give it him the other part of your face to be slapped, or you defend yourself?
So what needs to happen then to cool this thing down, to de-escalate, as the United States keeps on saying?
Well, the symptoms are clear. All what is going on from provocations, from airstrikes, are the symptoms of the illness of the Israeli occupation to the Palestinian land. All what we are want to say is that the equation is easy: live and let others live. According to the international community, Palestinians need to live in peace and security. Everyone has the right to live in dignity. This is all what we want. Is it something too much to be asked by the international community? This is the only thing that the international community is asked to do, to achieve for Palestinian people. It's their responsibility to bring Israel accountable for its deeds. I mean, forcibly displacement of civilians from their own lands is considered war crime according to the Rome Statute. War against civilians by the occupying power is considered also a violation for international law. This is what the international community needs to do with the Palestinians, only to address the illness, to address the Israeli occupation, to end the Israeli occupation, so that to achieve dignity for the Palestinian people. This is the only thing that is required. Let's remember how the South African apartheid went into end. It's only by the international solidarity, by the sanctions that were put on it by the international community. do sanctions on Israel, reinforce your power over Israel, and the whole thing will be solved. It's not about religion issues, it's only about human rights to live in dignity and peace in their own homeland as everyone around the world.
Do you think the international community is doing enough? They're saying a lot, the United States perhaps less so, seemingly talking about de-escalation without outrightly condemning Israel's actions. Do you think that the international community is doing enough for the current situation?
First of all, I would like to say that we are very proud of the South African government and the South African people for showing unwavering support for the Palestinian people and the Palestinian cause. And we do believe that no one can understand this plight as the South Africans, because you guys, you have been there in some part of your life. As for the international community, we do believe that the population, the people, the freedom, free people all over the world are supporting the Palestinian cause. As for the government, they are not doing their part. They should bear their responsibilities as an international community, and they should bring Israel accountable. Israel is the one and the only country that is considered above the law, above the organization, above the UN that created this state in 1949. We have to always remember that Israel is the one and the only country in the globe that has been established by a resolution of the UN, and now they do not even give any consideration to any resolution by the UN. It's the obligation of the international community to bring this occupying power accountable for their deeds, especially when it comes to violation of international law and to committing war crimes.
Are you disappointed in a number of Arab countries that you would have thought in the past would have come to your aid, particularly with voice, but in recent times they've gravitated towards Tel Aviv and are not so vocal at this time?
Well, we do not only count on the governments of the Arab countries. We still do consider them as our geographical context and environment. We, as Palestinians, we count on the population of the Arab world. And we know that by heart, by mind, by conscious and subconscious, all the Arabs in the region are supporting Palestine. And this is something that we can clearly see on the social media platforms, even though the mainstream media in the other worlds might not show what I'm saying to you. But in this regard, of course, we do believe that the Arab youngsters and the Arab youth and even the old people, the population in general, are in support with what's going on in Palestine. No one can say against this.
There's always been a question about how unified the Palestinians are in terms of a way forward. And when we see Hamas taking this action, firing rockets into Israel, is everybody behind that in the Palestinian territories?
I would love to say that why do we always say that Hamas is firing rockets? Why Hamas is firing rockets at the first place? Because we are defending ourselves. Is it okay for Israel just to use this excuse by defending themselves? They are launching rockets all over for 2 consecutive days. Yesterday, a complex of 13 residential blocks was brought to earth. 80 families were left with no shelter. Is this defending themselves while the Palestinians don't have the right to defend themselves? Yes, the Palestinian people are united more than ever. And maybe one important aspect in this uprising or what's going on in Palestine is that there is another dynamic that came into the ground, which are the Palestinians who have Israeli citizenships, the Palestinians who are living inside Israel. They were hand in hand, shoulder to shoulder with their brothers and sisters when Al-Aqsa was attacked. And this is a very good indicator, at least, that we have to be thankful for the Israeli escalation, because it brings all the dynamics of the Palestinian people inside Israel, in West Bank, in Gaza Strip, and in East Jerusalem together in standing against a brutal colonial expansionist regime. I would say that for the first time since long, we are united in front of the Israeli apartheid regime.
So in the present moment, will the rockets continue to be fired into Israel? And do you see the Israeli airstrikes continuing? Because all that will result is a loss of life.
The loss of lives, unfortunately, are from the Palestinian side. If we are looking at the numbers, you will be shocked that only 2 Israelis were killed, while on our side we have 48 Palestinians, including 13 children up to this moment, and 3 women. We do believe that the airstrike from the Israeli side will continue definitely, because as I said, it's a strategy that is led by Netanyahu. He's a fanatic settler and he wants to satisfy his electoral base. So he will take it as a bridge to reach to his destination. His destination is to show the Israeli population that he is the man of the time. He can manage the crisis. And unfortunately, it's always the Palestinians who have to pay the bill. It's always the blood of the Palestinians who should be on the table.